This is Comic Spot, where the Army veteran gets to vet out veterans of comedy like Joe De Luca, who's a writer and a comedian. I met him at Comic Strip Live in New York at the Gladys Simon Room. Welcome, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Linda. Great to see you. Great to see you.
Thank you.
To see you.
It's hard to hear me when I keep talking, isn't it?
That's why we're both comedians.
I'm so happy you're on here. You're an actor. I mean, you're a writer and a comedian, and I'm acting like I can remember my notes. But the thing is that you are magical on stage. Have people told you you have the X factor? Has Gladys shimmied up to you and told you you got what it takes? Because you got what it takes.
You're very kind. Gladys, as you know, tells you exactly what she's thinking. So usually her first critique, and so many comedians of all levels, shapes, and sizes have worked with Gladys. So, you know, the top 10 comedians you can name today have been through her room. But she'll first tell you about how you look. So I usually get, I'm too fat, I'm too thin, my shirt is too this, too that. But she's really supportive, but always critical. So I've definitely had, you know, you're not very likable. Do you have any friends? How does your wife tolerate you? She's also very supportive.
Yes, yes, indeed. So I've loved it every time you've got on stage because you just captivate a room. People, they pay attention to you, they laugh. You know, there's other people like myself, you know, it's taken this long for people to even want to hear what comes out of my mouth, you know. And you had what it took when I first saw you like 3 years ago. And how long have you been doing comedy? 20, 30?
Here's the thing. I moved to New York in the early 90s, and I went up and auditioned at the Comic Strip. And the first time I ever auditioned, I was right about to go on, and this young comic named Jon Stewart was practicing for his first Letterman gig. And so they said, can he jump in front of you? And I was terrible. And I, you know, he lit the room on fire, all different kinds of crowds. He just lit up. And I got up there and I had about a half a joke and 4.5 minutes of just sweating. So I ended up deciding at that time to focus more on writing. And I spent most of my career as a writer of serious things, books, and I wrote for Wall Street companies and made a nice living. So it was only about 4 years ago that I came back. And, you know, all along the way I'd written plays, and I wouldn't tell anyone at Goldman Sachs that I was sneaking out at night to see a play I had written off Broadway. So I always loved it. I always loved comedy, but really in earnest only started doing stand-up about 4 years ago. And as you know, it's very mixed in the beginning. So my first night went great. I got the bug. And then my second night was a train wreck. And, you know, it's taken me about 4 years to get where I can show up on most stages and feel okay. But I am by no means, I'm still a work in progress.
Oh, wow. I didn't know your backstory. I had assumed that it was comedy all along.
Always loved it. You know, in high school, I wrote cartoons and jokes and funny columns for my school paper. So I was always kind of like the funny writing, but was never I always like to give jokes to other people. I'm like your friend George Saltz, where if I see you do a set, you'll come off and I'll say, hey, try sweetening this joke. All the young comics hate it. They look at me like, well, this is a competition. Why would you possibly give me a joke? Whereas comics my age and up tend to say, yeah, I'll take a look. And, you know, 9 out of 10 times it's not their voice, but once in a while people like it.
Yes. Somebody handed me a really good tag the other night, and I used it after a joke, and the tag killed. the tag was just dynamite, you know, and I was like, wow, I'll take any help I can get, you know.
That's the question. Were you happy or sad that it worked better than the joke?
Well, the person that got me the gig was the one that said, you know, I'm going to tape you, and if it's no good, we can just delete the tape that night. And I thought, oh, challenge accepted. I'm going to kill. And he goes, and so here's a tag if you want to try it. I knew the tag was dynamite, right? But I wasn't going to tell him because I was going to, I had something up my sleeve. So I delivered the joke, and then I looked him dead in the eyes while he's filming me off to the side and delivered the tag while I'm staring in his eyes. And the whole place is busting up at his tag while I'm staring at him while filming it. It was so fun.
That's
I like
pretty
playing
good.
with, you know, I like, you know me, I don't really do things like the normal way. I have to think of a creative way to do it.
Good self-promotion as well, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah. Just a
promoter
second.
has to do
I'm unplugged. That should work. So that was fun. Yeah. I didn't feel bad. I was out to prove that he was going to videotape me and he was not going to delete the video. Oh, are you kidding me?
Right, right.
Thanks
No,
a
brilliant,
lot.
brilliant.
So you grew up where? Because you said you came to New York in the 90s. So
Yeah,
where'd you come from?
are you a military? You're a veteran, correct? So you moved
Yes.
around. My dad was ex-Navy, and my mother was an Army and then Air Force brat. So they were both, they moved and they didn't think anything of it. So I was born in the Caribbean, lived up and down the East Coast in Maryland, Florida, Vermont, New York. Um, but I went to college in central New York, and all my friends were either moving to New York City or, let's say, Chicago or LA. So I like New York City the best. So I moved here with you know, a single suitcase and maybe $500, and just said I'd figure it out, and it worked out. But it was, you know, some pretty lean times.
Wow. And so you were, what was the reason that you went from college? You worked at Goldman Sachs?
Yeah, so I was a funny major in college. I was something called agricultural economics.
Whoa.
Um, so they were training me to run the business of a farm. But I moved to New York, and there's a paucity of good farms. So I ended up, you know, like in LA, you fall into the entertainment business. In New York, you kind of fall into finance. Um, and the thing I ended up being good at was uh, writing or translating complex strategies to simple text. So I just, you know, I ended up having a 25. I would argue I'm still in finance because I'm on some boards and things, but had a long career just doing that. But it was really, you know, I think if I'd moved to Kansas, I probably would have worked for a farm, or I interviewed for food companies like Aldi Foods, but they were finicky about people with mediocre GPAs.
Mediocre GPAs. Oh my gosh. So, um, you said that you wrote off Broadway plays.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to tell me which ones, or would you have to kill me after?
No, you know, for anyone who wants to, it'd be tough to see one. You'd have to produce it yourself. Um, but in the, I guess, early 2000s, there were a bunch of these little off-Broadway theaters like the Love Creek Theater, the Riant, you know, there were dozens of them. And, you know, one I wrote was called Still Life with Jackass. And it was a 15-page or 20-page short play. And you'd go up in these nights where they might have 3 short plays, and they'd usually have a famous Broadway writer, and then maybe a mid-level, and then a schmuck, and I would be the schmuck. So, you know, I wrote a couple of you know, short plays like that. that, was terrifically fun. As you'd guess, the quality of actors at that level determines how well comedy goes off. So I had one play where I don't think the lead actor knew it was a comedy. And, it was painful to watch. And then I had them where what I wrote was not half as funny as what the actors did. But it's really great when you have a day job. That was like a nice, nighttime diversion. You go meet with the directors, and then again, when the plays would air, you get, your mailman, anybody you saw on the street to come see your play. Not that different from going to open mics, right? Where you'd say, "Hey, Bob, you once said if I ever did a stand-up show, you'd like to go." Well, it's tonight. And they'd always say, "No, can we do it on Christmas Eve? That's when I'm," like, this. People will always say, "I'd like to see you do stand-up on Friday in Midtown." They don't even know if Sinbad can command that kind of, he might have to book a room.
Oh my gosh.
Well?
What?
You find that as well, that your friends will say, "Hey, I'm in town tonight. Can you get up at the
Yes.
Gotham Comedy Club for the 8 o'clock show?" And I'd have to say, "Well, it's Jerry Seinfeld tonight, but I'm sure I could bump him."
Yes, I do find that to be the case. People are so funny. They're like, "I'm coming on the 14th to Vegas. I really like the Jimmy Kimmel Comedy Club." And I'm like, "Well, have you ever heard of the Thunderbird Inn Boutique Hotel and Casino?" No?
That's where the real laughter is.
Exactly. And it's 20 feet from my doorstep. So who's winning now?
Right.
So, what was your favorite thing that ever happened off Broadway?
Off Broadway.
Yeah.
I did a show where it's a silly thing, but the character's supposed to be a loser. It was autobiographical. And he was singing along. He was just sitting watching TV and singing along to the theme to the show, Good Times.
Wow.
And the audience started singing the lyrics to the show. I just thought that was a cool moment, that we all suddenly were excited about singing the lyrics to the show, Good Times.
That's super. I love it when an audience gels in that moment. It's like I don't know, it's like a superpower when a room full of people watching comedy or a play all become one unit. Yeah. Isn't that cool?
It's why live, you can't convey in a Netflix comedy special how great live comedy is. Certainly, I've never seen anything capture how great improv comedy is, right? I think it's fun to go to see Second City in Chicago, but on TV, you're just like, well, it just seems not as good as scripted comedy to me.
Yes. Have you done a lot of improv yourself?
Not really. I guess, you'd have to go back to high school, or, there are nights, for example, you and I have worked the comic strip where you'll walk out, especially because I do late night sets. So there's a group of comedians that'll do sets after the main show from like 10 to 11:30. And you'll just walk out and there'll be 7 people left in the audience. They're all from one family. They might be coworkers. One night I went out and there were just 7 guys with leaf blowers sitting in the audience. So it would be silly for me to just do a canned set. So you have to improvise, right? And so I've done entire 10-minute sets that are improv. They can work better. They can also be a lot worse. I mean, that's why you like to have jokes, is much bigger distribution of outcomes.
Yes. And so, speaking of doing stand-up, not just at Comic Strip Live, what in all your stand-up that you've done, what was your favorite or couple favorite moments? What club, what scenario happened? Was it a funny heckler, somebody dropped dishes and a comedian said something funny? I mean, like, memorable moments out there. I want to hear them all.
Favorite, I've done a couple of corporate gigs because I was a corporate guy. So I kind of know how to balance being funny with not destroying the stock value of a company. I did really large corporate gigs for the old chemical bank when I was an aspiring comedian in the 90s. Recently, I did a corporate gig with a very funny group of comedians, Peter Stewart and
Wow.
Brian McKenna and Jim Wallace, for a big investment firm. We did their Christmas party, and it was fantastic. These people were so happy to be there. And I think we all knew enough about the firm to cater the jokes. That was exciting. I personally was really excited when, various comedy clubs pass you. So they'll say, you can be a regular and come by. And one of the guys who still does that is Richie Tinkin, who owns the comic strip. And I got really excited the night I auditioned, and he said, all right, if you want to, you can come by and do the late night. And it doesn't sound like much, but it was a milestone for a guy, in his 40s.
Yes, that's a big deal.
Yeah. In terms of strange things that happen, I did have the night that I was making my tape for a comedy festival. I had my best set. I did a great job that night, got big laughs. It was maybe a 10-minute set. And somebody was very kind, capable person was taping it for me. Right in the middle of my set, right by the camera, a busboy spilled an entire tub of glasses. So it sounds like, D-Day. And you hear nothing of what I'm saying for about a minute of my set. It's still probably my best set I've done. So I use it despite the horrific catastrophe. And then, hecklers, I've never had trouble with hecklers because you have the microphone, right? I've never had hecklers, be too much of a problem. But one night a heckler said something and I was bored with my set. Like I just done it 20 times. I was bored with the joke. And the heckler said, like he groaned. And I said, hey man, I don't even know what I said, but he said, you're boring. I was like, man, that cuts to the thick of, if you want to heckle someone, I think you're boring is about as deep as it cuts, I got through the set, but I said to the guy after, dude, you hit it with your boring. I couldn't come through that. And he said, oh, I didn't say that. So this moment where I'm like, did I just say that to myself? He's just very old and infirmed. I'll tell you offline who the heckler was.
Okay, I can't wait. I need to get the track of that person dropping that D-Day sound and insert that where I'm not getting laughs.
Yeah.
That would be magic.
It's like the old trombone with the, what do you call it? The plunger,
Yeah. So what do you have planned to do better after we get out of the pandemic, because of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's a great question.
Thank you.
I haven't thought about it much, but I would say in general, there have been these Zoom comedy calls, and I assume that clubs will be more sparse, right? You won't have everyone condensed up front, so you won't get that good, rich, contagious laughter. And I think for all comedians who've been doing it, let's say less than 10 years, we're too reliant. We get too much feedback from the laughter. And I think after this, by necessity, we're going to have to all be better at, speaking to a room of people who are 10 feet apart. We would say it's a rough night if the room's at 25 capacity, but that's going to be our best case going back to the clubs, right?
Yes.
So I'd say try to be a little better at that, not let the audience or the feedback control the quality of the set so much.
I love that. That's a great challenge for everybody that's doing comedy or any kind of performing, because performance is going to change.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the interview. As a comedian, as a writer, you've looked at the world through funny eyeballs. I'm not saying you have fun. God forbid I should say that, but you look at the world as a comedian, you see things normal people don't see are funny to you. And so with that in mind, to close us out, what's the funniest observation you've seen during the pandemic of people acting strange, stupid, weird, hard, scary, that cracks you up?
You know, it's a kind of a funny thing that nobody can go anywhere. And it's not funny, haha. It's just weird. I live in the suburbs. I live in Montclair, New Jersey, and we live on a quiet street. And it's weird that every time I look out my window, there are just these zombies walking up and down the street. You know, some wearing masks. They're not neighbors. I've never seen them before. They're just people who are getting out walking for an hour a day. But there's something, you know, really, I'll think I'm just going to go out and get the paper, and I'll look out the window and there's just a couple of those zombies creeping by. And I'm like, oh, I'll get the paper later. It's been kind of keeping me out of the front yard. On the bright side, people are talking to each other. So I'll be yelling across the street, hi, how you know, we're all kind of needy. And there was a woman walking with a mask, and I hadn't seen her before. And I said, hi, how you doing? And she said, I got divorced and moved here right before the pandemic, and I'm just alone with no one to talk to. And I thought, that's an amazing thing to yell across the street. And of course, me being a kind person, I said, oh, very good, then I got to go. And I kept walking, but you know, I thought about that person a lot. That's, you know, that's got to be a strange situation if you just moved to a new town, you have no one, and you're isolated, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's hard getting through it being all by yourself, you know. And so, you know, what's weird for me is my best line that I came up with asking myself this question was like, I'm 69 years old. And for me, it's really weird that this is the first time I've seen men wear protection.
Yeah.
And then they want me in my room. What? They're
requesting protection.
Yes.
They're demanding it.
Yeah. And then they want me in my room by myself.
Hey, thanks so much.
What?
I just said thanks so much.
Yes. Thank you so much.
I think our connection is unstable.
I think I'm unstable too. I have something in common with it. It's been wonky. I'm going to let you go. You look cute up front. I like that.
That's why I did it.
Tell your wife hello. Thank you.
Yes, my wife.
Thank you so much, Joe. I love you lots.
Say hi to the gang.
I will.
Hey, thank you, and have a great Independence Day, and thanks for being a veteran and supporting veterans causes. You know, I'd say this is another time to say thank you. So thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Love you lots. See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everybody's